Hero Club presents Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu. Welcome to Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu, episode 72. I am your host and co-creator, Wheelchair21, and tonight I am joined by pretty much my only host or concurrent host for like the last, almost 20 or 30 effing episodes, since Mooch's job has taken him away, Janitor Joker. Project's job has surely taken him away. It is none other than Soundout 12.
Here I am, and here I will stay for the time being.
I'm pretty sure you're going to be the one who, at least stays here the longest, because I can even guarantee you that it's probably not going to even change by the time we get to the fabled episode 100. I mean, maybe by episode 100, Joker will at least be there for at least 5 episodes leading in and maybe 2 episodes leading out, maybe? Project might actually show up for that episode specifically. I mean, he did, I think, show up for the 50th episode, but that was the 50th episode, so who knows how that's going to turn out, because we're still, 28 away.
This is true.
Point? Or are we 18? I can't. No, we're not.
Yeah, we could all implode on ourselves before that happens too, but we'll see.
I was gonna say, how can we implode on ourselves if we're not certain other people and certain other websites?
Comicbook.com? I'm sorry, what?
Oh, I was actually talking about ones we knew that imploded or we caused.
My answer doesn't change.
We haven't caused that one yet.
Well, you haven't.
Oh no. What have you done?
What needed to be done?
Well, anyways, though, if you're joining us now, you probably don't know that this episode is technically a sequel to last week's episode, where we did talk about the Toho classic kaiju film, Atragon. Now, it is labeled as a kaiju film, even though it's just an average tokusatsu film, featuring a kaiju for, only 5 effing minutes. However, it was also based on 2 short novels from Japan, which were then later adapted into a 2-episode OVA series, which actually, before we even get into that, and I think even on the last episode, we mentioned we're already better than the original 60 film. So that's one of the cool elements about this. And so for those who don't know, Super Atragon, which we'll review shortly, was made in, 94 and 95, released in North America somewhere between 96 and 98 through ADV Films. So if anyone has seen the Gamera Trilogy or Evangelion, or I think the original release of Noir or Bubblegum Crisis, you probably have those adverts on your home video releases. So that might give you some idea as to why that name might sound familiar outside of the original Showa film Atragon or just the Gotengo in general.
I feel like old ADV releases are how we all cognitively remember things that are really obscure.
That's actually true, because, I like a lot of obscure anime from ADV's releases that are either now owned by Discotek or Funimation, I believe.
Sentai Filmworks as well.
Oh, yeah, Sentai Filmworks did.
I think almost everybody has recovered something from ADV.
I think the only one who hasn't is Viz, maybe. I think Viz didn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, or they haven't, I just don't know.
Viz is just the shonen company, though, so,
Whereas Funimation is, we're also shonen, but we'll still steal other shit, too.
This is true. Damn those IBO releases.
So before we actually jump into the actual anime, which is, I gotta say, incredible, and it's almost 2 hours long, we're gonna actually talk about the element of the fact that Toho Mecha, Toho vehicles are really interesting and unique in their own regards. And we're gonna mostly be focusing in on specifically, the highlighted characters. Not the Mazer units, because there's so many Mazers out there that, I could just have an entire conversation about. Soundout probably could have a conversation about every age variant out there, or Metal's tangent on the Zaku 2 variants.
Yeah, I think we each have those things where it's we love something and we'll look at every single variation of it, especially when there's multiples, Yeah,
because with me, I know there's 8 to 12 different Mazer units, and I can actually distinguish which ones or which films they usually originated from, or the Mazer jets, which people forget exist, but that's another story. So we're going to mostly be looking in on stuff say, the original Gotengo, the SY3 from Destroy All Monsters, the Super X's, the 3 of those, modern-day Gotengo from Final Wars, Kiryu from the Kiryu Saga, and Super Mecha Godzilla, as well as Mogira from Space Godzilla. We're just going to, talk about those, just talk about good points, strong points, elements, and how these mechas, in a sense, define Toho's kaiju genre, I guess is the best way to say it.
Absolutely.
Alright, so I guess we should just go in chronological order briefly? Would that be the best way to do it?
Considering I don't know most of these, yes.
Okay, good. Actually, no, you should if you've seen the Heisei era. Or
I
the modern
have,
era.
but continue.
So our first one that I can think of, and I might probably be skipping over Gunhead, but that's such an obscure tokusatsu
That
film
sounds like
that
a
not even I've
Gundam
seen it.
mobile suit. Gunhead.
So fun fact before we get into our chronological order. Gunhead is actually a mecha tank vehicle that was actually in the original pilot script for Godzilla vs. Biollante and got omitted. It then somehow, like, Toho liked the idea of what it was and turned it into, like, this weird futuristic, punk, like, military-based kind of movie, which got its own release, which was also an ADV release, ironically enough, when it came to North America. So that's another thing, Sound Out, is I'm actually looking to rip that off of a website because someone did upload it illegally. So I'm gonna try to get a copy of it so I can share it with you because it's actually an interesting film from the clips I've seen and the trailers I know for it. So yeah, for anyone who doesn't know what that is, check it out. Gunhead ADV release or the original film. If you have a copy, if you know what it is, talk about it in the comments below. But we're gonna go in order now. So first off we have is Gotengo, which we did talk about a bit last week of how it's a character, how it's a ship, how it's a product of its time. And it's mostly like a really big ass super sub with, like, I guess you would say regalia and paint schemes that fit an oil tanker because it's gray and red. On top of it has basic battleship mounted tank, anti-aircraft cannons, anti-ship cannons, and then it has the drill that also is its absolute zero cannon, which would be eventually used for Kiryu years later. Me and Sana did talk about it a bit, that it's kind of so much of a product of its time due to Battleship Yamato and Captain Harlock. And what can you add about it, Sound Out?
Gotengo was in Final Wars too, wasn't it?
Yeah, we'll get to its Final Wars incarnation at the end because I think that's the last technical mecha for the franchise, as well as its brethren that appeared.
So, like, basically, I never knew of it before Final Wars. Like, Final Wars is kind of my introduction to it. Like, going back and seeing, like, its earlier, uses and incarnations, it's so much cooler than it was in Final Wars. There's a lot to it. It's got, like, this really kind of, like, classic vintage look to it, and the way that it operates is just really awesome.
Yeah, it's weird too, because for me, while I like its vintage design that matches what the animes and mangas were doing at the time of just turning submarines and spaceships and kind of combining them together to make these cool space odysseys and soap operas and space opera kind of scenarios, is great. The problem I think though when we do get to the Final Wars one is that the Final Wars one was so true futuristic, trying to be a real battleship, but because the film is also shot slightly in a dark, rainy kind of tone, you don't get to see a lot of the details that actual ship had compared to this original one, which was shot in bright, blue sky backgrounds, bright lit hangars, and you get to see it. So you get to see this nice, elegant, old school sub going around effing shit up, whereas you have, its future incarnation shot in a lot of dark angles. I think the weird thing that is endearing about it is, without its absolute zero cannon per se, Kiryu's best element probably wouldn't exist. Maybe.
This is very true.
So the next big, I guess you would say, character ship that is, in a sense, focused upon in Godzilla lore is the Sy3 spaceship from Destroy All Monsters. Now, me and Sound Out, I know you've seen this one because we watched it together. The Sy3 is practically this weird futuristic space needle of a spaceship that it doesn't really do much. It has torpedoes, it has basic artillery shells, but mostly it just moves around and it's a set piece kind of, or it's an element piece to show how characters get from the moon to Earth. What's interesting about it is that it's one of the most iconic ships, mostly because of the film it's in. Destroy All Monsters was the last great movie of the Showa era. In a sense, it was the pinnacle of all the movies that were made up to that point, even though there were future films. It was the last great because it still had Eiji, it still had Ishiro Honda, and all those guys still together. It was their final project, all there, the godfathers in a sense of tokusatsu. And the interesting thing is, I don't know if you knew this, Sound Out, because I showed you the NHK documentary where they were showing effects and props.
Right.
That ship that was shooting fire out of its engines, it was made out of wood and plastic.
Interesting.
So that's the weirdest thing, is that it's a wooden model ship that was shooting fire, which somehow I don't know how it didn't explode or catch flame, but they probably went through several models. Your thoughts on the Sy3 from destroy all monsters.
I think it was cool. Overall, it's not that memorable to me. I think that there was a lot of other things in the movie that kind of like took over, my consciousness of trying to remember things. And I probably paid more attention to it the next time I watched the movie, but it's something that didn't make a huge impression on me.
Yeah, I don't, like, that's the thing for me. I don't think it made an impression on me that much either, outside of it was a bright, shiny silver ship. I think what left an impression on so many people in Japan was, I think the moon landing was in the early to mid 60s, and this was 68. So to see, I think, what a typical, like, spaceship has to be is being a vertical takeoff, being able to, like, somehow use jets and thrusters from going into, like, vertical takeoffs to then, like, alter its course and trajectory to allow it to still land and then vertical take off from the Earth to go back to the moon, is why I think it was memorable for the era that it was made in, was because they tried to make it somewhat super realistic while being fantasy based. It was like, it just felt like it could happen, or it should happen in that way. And I think the other reason is mostly because it is like that impact of the legacy that it was a part of, the last great Showa Kaiju Iga film.
Yeah.
I think that's why it's the precedence is there. Whereas for us Americans, we've seen, like, that film, we've seen other films so many times that it was like the galore of Destroy All Monsters wasn't the ship or the story that it helped to convey with the human cast. It was just that we were in it for the spectacle of the convergence of the kaiju in this film specifically.
Right.
And then following that, we have Mechagodzilla. But Mechagodzilla, while it is a mecha, and there was Showa Mogira, they were tools of not humanity's evolution. They were, extraterrestrial. Like, the original Mogira, which I know you haven't seen because of Mysterians, is just, like, kind of like a weird mole kaiju. Like, it just looks like a weird robot, right? And you have Mechagodzilla, which is a clone of Godzilla. And while they're mechas, they're just autonomous, like, android kind of things that move, whether it be by basic controls or by basic programming. They can either move by controls, radio controls, or automatic, just enabled into their psyche or in their central computer core if, the base sort of gets destroyed. So, like, for me, while they are mecha, while they are iconic, I just wanted to focus on the human aspect. So for those listening, it was just mostly, those elements. We'll get to the extraterrestrial mecha probably, on another episode, because that's a whole different spiel, because there's only, like, a few of them, whereas the human side is, like, always more interesting, I think. Because then, after the Showa, we go into the first Heisei movie, 84, where Super X is a mecha vehicle that spun off into popularity, which spun off into evolutions of the, in a sense, the character or the project, because the first one in that film, they establishes to put out nuclear fires, to put out just reactor fires, put out massive wildfires. It wasn't made to fight Godzilla, but yet, ironically enough, part of its armament made it, susceptible to be a Godzilla anti-weapon, that they're like, well, if we load it with enough of these weapons, like cadmium shells and all these other, chemicals, we probably could defeat Godzilla. Like, its hull might not hold, but we probably have enough time to shoot it and run. And as a kid, I think it's, like, one of my favorite versions of the Super X. Like, I love all Super X's, but, like, I just remember the scene that you have where it goes through the building where Godzilla already put a hole through it, and it's shooting him through the hole, and Godzilla's, like, running through the building towards them, as it's, like, slowly, like, circling around him to come around before it eventually gets blasted one more time and meets its demise. Your take on the first Super X?
It's pretty cool. I think I can kind of see why you love the Super X, the different versions of the Super X's, specifically. I think I can see why you love them so much, because they are really cool. For me personally, like, not being a super big battleship guy, I think Super X is probably one of my favorites overall. It's got a lot of awesome qualities to it.
Like, the first one, it was just basic, because they were like, we did not plan for this to fight Godzilla, whereas, a couple of years following, we get Super X2, where it looks like the first one, but what they do now is like, oh no, we're going to replace all of the ideas of just bombarding him with missiles and cadmium shells, hoping he'll swallow them and die, is we do this weird diamond reflective panel. It opens up like a flower. But this is the thing that me and Visible Ninja always talk about, is that they built this reflective panel that I think they underestimated the efficiency it would have over consistent waves of attacks from Godzilla. In its first confrontation, as you see, Godzilla blasts it probably like 4 or 5 times directly right into the mouth of the bay of this mirror reflective panel, and it literally destroys the mirror in its first confrontation with it. It like only lasts a couple of rounds, and then Godzilla's overall nuclear waves and heats backfire on the thing. It just throws the rulebook out, and it kind of is regulated to being like just more of a decoy throughout the rest of the film.
Yeah, it definitely, it's a lot of things that the humans build in Godzilla movies end up being just decoys. It really, the end of the day.
And that's the sad part, is like the first two Super X's, they kind of are, unfortunately, like decoy fodder. While they do work to some regard, they don't have enough pull. But then they're like, well, we're gonna take Mecha King Ghidorah, which was built from future humans, which honestly, while it's one of the weirder and cooler designs, it's kind of weird because technically it's a cyborg kaiju that's now controlled by a cockpit. Like, it's so weird. It's like a zombie cyborg. I don't even know how that works, because technically it's a mecha in a cyborg. Like,
Yeah.
like, do we even what is your take on Mecha King Ghidorah? Do you consider it like a full-on mecha? Because I never really did, but I'm not too sure like how to approach it, because
I treat it as a
it's
cyborg,
confusing.
I think.
Like, because like it's all controlled by a cockpit, but it's still cyborg mechanisms because it's a zombie in a sense. Because it's a weird take, because it is a mecha because there's a cockpit, but they gutted a creature and it makes no logical sense, and it's probably why that movie's sometimes like more in a sense loved and liked.
Yeah.
Is because it's so obnoxiously weird. And then we get, them reverse engineering the tech to make what is usually deemed now in most Godzilla communities the weakest appreciated Mecha Godzilla. Like it's one of the strongest ones in durability and fighting potential, but by, I think, the concept and the overall film, it is the least loved Mecha Godzilla, because a lot of people still prefer the Showa one and prefer Kiryu over it. Plus, you have the Garuda attachment that kind of just jumps onto it like a weird backpack, which I don't know if it was a direct ploy at mocking Sentai at the time. With, in the 90s, you had the Super O Robo or whatever it was called, and then you had, Galaxy Delta Galaxy Mega or Super Galaxy Mega, if I remember the name correctly.
Yeah.
So, like, your take on the whole Super Mecha Godzilla?
I mean, I always like Super Mechagodzilla, probably because of the Super Sentai angle, and I don't know, I'm very happy looking at it, and I definitely like that version of Mechagodzilla specifically, and it I don't know, there's something about it that just makes me feel good about it.
Like, for one thing, I prefer the poster version more, and I'm so glad we still got that Chogokin Tamashi mix.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why, I love that version so much more, which has, like, the very Showa-esque kind of nasal cannons. I don't know why, I love that poster, and I can't still believe we have an action figure, a collectible action figure that turns into the tank, the jet, and does all this crazy stuff that makes it feel more Sentai-y, which was supposed to, like, the best part about it is because had they been able to use that version of the Super Mecha Godzilla, the actual, poster tie-in / product that we did get years later with Tamashi, it would have made more sense as to why, when they then take the scrap parts of Mechagodzilla, we get Heisei Mogira. Because Heisei Mogira is a two-piece Sentai mecha vehicle where you have a jet, you have a tank, and they kind of like parts shift. They don't parts form, but they, just start transforming, and then they connect, and then you have like this giant weird robotic mole. It's like one of my favorite mechas of all time, and its original transforming toy is one of the hardest ones to now find on the secondary market, because they only made one, they barely reissued it, and they haven't done a Tamashi version yet.
That's true, yeah.
Now, I forget, you've seen the Heisei era, so have you seen the Mogira
Yeah,
one?
I have seen the Mogira one.
That you haven't watched?
I've watched all of the Heisei era, from Return to Return to Destroyer.
Yeah, so your take on Mole Man.
I like Mogira in the regards of it being similar to Mechagodzilla. It'd just be kind of like a different take on it. But overall, I mean, it's like, it is what it is. I can't say that it's like Mogira is like the most amazing thing in the world, but it's kind of cute and kind of charming.
It's funny because it's like a better upgrade. If you look at its Showa version, though, you're like sitting there and you're like, nah, this one's better. Hey, Heisei's better.
It really is. It incredibly is like much better, and I like it, and I kind of wanted the monster art, but I never was able to do it, just for various reasons. But it's
Still sitting
cool.
here going, Tamashi mix, Tamashi mix, Tamashi mix, Tamashi mix. Give me one that transforms, damn it.
That'd be awesome. That'd be freaking cool.
Because like I just want it. It's one of my favorite mechas. It's one of my favorite designs. A lot of people like love it, and I don't know why we don't get it. Oh my god, what if we got a super mini Plamogira?
I'd probably lose my mind.
I'd lose my mind in a heartbeat, but I think it might be tied up because of that Kamiya, the chibi ones that I got right now. Maybe the license is tied up with them. Wait, no, we might actually get a model kit Mogira because there's either a Kotobukiya or another company is making a Kiryu model kit right now that's in like 1/6 or 1/100 scale. Yeah, I think it's 1/100 scale. There's one right now. It's like on AmiAmi. It's like $300.
That's true.
Yeah, so that's the case. Next mecha is actually Super X2. Super X3, which is now a weird VTOL biplane kind of super tank, which the weirder thing is this is the most successful Super X, because 1, it doesn't get damaged in its fight with Godzilla, 2, it never gets shot down in Godzilla vs. Destroyer, and 3, it actually is the one that does the finishing blow on Destroyer, then helps JDSF to cool down Godzilla before, shit seldomly hit the fan. Your take?
This one's hard. I don't know why this one's hard, but it really is kind of hard for me. I don't know. Like, do you have anything else to say about it? Because, like, I feel like I'm, like, at a lack of words here.
I don't know. It's like, I think because it becomes more of a plane, a lot of people usually tend to call it the redheaded stepchild. That's, like, usually how I've seen it on communities. Like, forums and boards. But for me, I've just liked the element that it actually was more effective for the idea of, with Godzilla, you probably shouldn't be facing him straight on, and you should do the more tactical route of doing like military, like bombardiering strike runs, so you're constantly moving and being harder, to attack and hit with, like, say, his atomic ray, or physically, like, whack with the tail. Like, the quicker you're moving, the better chances you have. Like, I know it lowers your accuracy, but I just think it's like the better survival tactic compared to the previous versions. I think that overall it's one of those ones where, because it doesn't keep as the weird hovering dome UFO like VTOL, it loses that connectivity with the fans that have already got used to the project per se, I guess.
Right.
I mean, then when we go into the Millennium Era, we only got 2 technically. You got Kiryu. Then you got the Gotengo, which we were talking about, plus its siblings, where its siblings all look like they're based off of ships from Mobile Suit Gundam. Like, it's, when you look at all this, like the 2 or 3 siblings, plus the concept art for the other ones that were around the world but we didn't see in the film, they look like they're battleships used in straight off of Sunrise. They're not competing with, like, I like, the best way to say it is that they're not competing with Battleship Yamato. They're not competing with really Harlock. They look like they're out of a Sunrise anime if you look up the concept arts for those ships. And then you have Kiryu, who's just a skeletal zombie mecha, which I think everyone loves. It's like that one. It's the best. It's the best.
He's amazing. He's so pretty.
Here's the weird part. I don't know if Kiryu, like, I think they address Kiryu as a she, even though it's built on the original Godzilla, who's a guy. So it's so weird.
Kiryu is so pretty.
Is it because he's based on a cat?
Pretty.
Okay, Starfire. But yeah, no, other than that, like, what are your thoughts on, like, Kiryu armaments, attacks, abilities, and Gotengo and its siblings?
So, Kiryu is just amazing. There's nothing else to say there. It's just amazing. The Gotengo, actually, I don't know. The Gotengo seems cool, like, when I saw it originally, like I think I said before. But it's like a matter of, I don't know, something about it now, I'm like, it's not as cool as I think the Showa one. But it was neat to see the differences between them. And I think the differences is what makes it interesting. And I also like how Kiryu isn't just Mecha Godzilla again, kind of like how Super Mecha Godzilla was, but like something completely different within the same premise.
Yeah, no, that's the thing that I like, because, like, for me, Kiryu's probably one of my all-time favorites, a lot of people's favorites. And then you have, like I said, the Gotengo, where, for me, the modern design, I think the problem is that it's so, I guess, trying to be like that futuristic punk vibe of, like, what a technological ship should look like, that it sometimes does look a little alien, but it also still looks like it's, a ship.
Right.
Whereas you got the vintage one, which is straight up, we're just a logical ship just thrown in space. Where it's like, neither is a bad option. It is. compared to what we're going to be talking about in the anime. The anime version of Gotengo, for those of you who are going to slightly spoil a bit, is kind of steampunky with some of its parts and designs. Like, it's going, like, the best way to explain it is, before we get too far into this film, is it has like actual frills, almost like Divatox's like fish submarine, right? So
Yeah.
like, it has like a weird steampunk aesthetic to it,
It's like a giant fish floating around.
with a giant golden drill that's gonna fuck.
Don't most fishes have that?
No, I think only Sea Kings have that, and they're fictitious because they're from Pokemon.
Oh wait, there's that one Devilman character though.
Does that really count, though?
No.
So to wrap this up, Toho Mecha, memorable, iconic, interesting, because you either remember them, you either forget them, or you go, wait, there was a submarine in this movie?
It's like, I was just looking at the monsters, not the submarines.
Which is funny, because we had a debate like this with somebody recently, where they weren't there for the story, they were just there for the monsters. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
We all know who we're talking about.
Pretty sure the audience hopefully knows who we're talking about.
And if not,
he's been on the show.
if not, they don't need to know.
Exactly. It wasn't Darkon. It was. Alright, and it's about time we start looking at the film, or should I say the OVA in particular, that we'll be talking about for this episode. As we've already stated in the early half of the episode, we are looking at the early 90s, mid-90s, weird contribution between Bandai, Kawakata, and Toho, the Super Atragon OVA, which is, I think, a runtime of about roughly 90 minutes or so, right, Soundout?
Yeah, it actually
You said it's
matches
around
the runtime of the Toku film.
Yeah, so when they remade the original books, I guess, or the original story and narrative from the books that the film was based on, they did a 2-episode OVA in the early 90s, and it was actually distributed in the late 90s, early 2000s in North America via ADV Films, which is kind of interesting due to the fact that a lot of, Mecha series came over because of ADV, as well as them distributing the Gamera Trilogy, which is how I actually learnt about them, and which is ironic, though, because ADV has nothing to do with, I think, Tokyo Shock, but Tokyo Shock were the ones who got the, actual original 63 film for North American distribution, even though most of their releases are now no longer in print. So that's a really weird factoid for you people listening.
Yeah,
Now,
Tokyo Shock actually falls under the Media Blasters banner.
yeah, I was pretty sure they were under Media Blasters, and ADV's now under, Section 23, right?
Technically, Section 23 was born out of the ashes of ADV. Because ADV
Yeah,
went
okay, I
under
wasn't
and all
sure.
their licenses got released and then scooped up by multiple companies. But Section 23 was formed by the people that worked at ADV.
Yeah, that's the thing that I wasn't sure about, because I remember the story about ADV workers now work for Sentai Filmworks, so on and so forth, but I wasn't sure exactly the whole rigmarole, due to the fact that there seems to be another subsidiary group from ADV that are trying to reformat still with, the ADV brand or acronym abbreviation in their title in some cases.
Essentially,
I just don't know in depth.
all of the employees that worked at ADV are now going around and doing their own thing.
Yeah, but nevertheless, the best way to explain the story is it's kind of a super retelling of the original novels. It omits Manda, because Manda supposedly was never in the original novels the story was based on.
Or Mandarake.
Yeah, poor Mandarake, as you like to call her or it, the ancient god of Mu. But the interesting thing about it is that it takes the story from what was supposed to be a World War II story that takes place in, the mid to late 60s, and it kind of upscales the narrative to what seems to be, the modern day when the OVA was written. Now, from what I understand with the little bit that is known about the anime, because when I do digging, there doesn't seem to be a concise amount of information on the OVA, except that it was more accurate to the book, and it did take minor liberties to push the timetable up a bit to make a more cool generational story, due to the fact that Toho did make their own liberties of adding in a kaiju, actually giving the subterranean race a true name known as the ancient civilization of Mu, and then, it went its own direction, whereas in the novels and in the, OVA, it's that we have these two almost Mothra-esque fairy agents from the subterranean society coming to the surface world and bringing, turmoil to it. In this case, we have Avatar and Annette. Avatar is the evil one, Annette's the good one, and she finds herself in 1940s working with the Japanese government, who found this weird ore from space, which is also the same ore the subterraneans have been using for countless years in the undersurface of the Earth to create warships. The warship that they create is obviously the Atragon. However, during the final days of World War II for the Japanese side, when the Hiroshima bomb is dropped, they encounter an American sub based on the Atragon that is bigger and stronger. However, the captain of the ship, Hyuga, actually decides to send Kageyama, his right-hand man, with a net off the ship so he can just barrel ass into it and hopefully sink both of them and, kind of save the world from possible annihilation in that case, because he realizes at this point that both of these weapons are super war machines that are equal to or stronger than atomic weaponry that was just dropped on Japan. We then fast forward to late 80s, early 90s, our present day story, where this woman who looks a lot like Annette is now in love with Captain Hyuga's grandson, Go, who is kind of pissed off that his... No, not that... No. Let's just say Go has a few daddy issues with the fact that his dad's gone missing, only to find out that his dad's actually still alive and is now the current captain of the revived Ra program, the Gotengo. And he's kind of pissed off, especially when he finds out that Annette is actually his girlfriend Anne, and they're one and the same, and that she has that weird mystical coma ability, that she's been in a coma and hasn't changed a day in over 45 years since World War II. And they're now having this weird battle with Avatar, who somehow has these super weapons that are giant spherical, laser guidances of death. It just beam spams, it uses weird gravitational rings, and honestly, a lot of the cool action scenes are depicted in the ADV dub trailer. So, if you want to know what we're talking about in the depth of the magnitude of what this weapon can do, or these weapons, just go look up the trailer. You'll see it. It's amazing. It's cool.
But also at the same time, the ADV trailer is similar to the promos for Gundam 0080 for Toonami, where they kind of show you some of the best parts of the whole thing.
Yeah, that's kind of the weird part. It is kind of true about that. It does give you some minor spoilers to the actual action, because overall the plot follows the suit of, they created the Ra in case of Avatar ever showing up again, because they kind of expected that Avatar or more of her could show up like them and bring havoc to the surface world. And they also kind of wanted to make it that the Ra itself is a ship that protects humanity and not just is more of a nationalistic pride-driven machine to help Japan win the war and become the, superpower nation. It's more or less in the mindset of, we're going to use this as the United Nations secret weapon to just defend the planet if extraterrestrials or subterranean people ever come trying to conquering the surface world. And that's the whole mindset, because when Avatar goes on her weird killing spree of destroying major cities, just trying to take over the planet, there's the Gotengo flying off and doing all of the work it needs to do to try to stop her and her machines. And it's a really good, I guess you would say, I wouldn't say it's one-dimensional, but it's one of those basic stories that you just go in, you watch it, you have a good time, and it's over. Even though the cliffhanger ending does leave off on the fact that after they do beat Avatar, they're going to take the Gotengo, or the Ra, and drill into the surface and then try to meet with these underground societies and peoples and actually try to open actual communications with them. And, they're calling it the new frontier, per se. So, most of the story is intact from the film. Just in this case, it's a really one-sided war, because it's just one agent going on this huge vendetta to reclaim the surface, with the possibility that she wants to not just rule the surface, but go back underground and take over the subterranean society. So it's one of those things where it's just so straightforward with you that it's just giving this description, it's there you go. That's all you need to know. It's a modern telling of the Tokusatsu film, but it just leaves out the giant Asian dragon that didn't do anything, as well as the absolute zero cannon. There's no absolute zero cannon. It's just lasers, drills, gunfire, and shells. It's just simple. It's great. It's a wartime story.
It really boils down Atragon into a place where, instead of the story being kind of overly complicated for what it was, it actually just makes everything perfectly simple, to the point where I don't think it needed to be as complicated as the original film tried to be.
Yeah, I think the film focused a lot on that weird renegade, I was a POW kind of storyline. Was, I got captured by the ancient civilization of Mu. At the same time, I found out, we lost the war. So I became a rogue agent, made a sub, and now I'm going to take over America, Russia, and the underground society. And everyone's like, are you a madman? bitch, I might be. And in this case, it's like, no, we had this secret plan out since day one. Japan contacted America, America contacted the UN. They were like, we need to rebuild this super sub and use it to defend all of the world. And they're like, okay, let's do this thing.
Pretty much.
I gotta say, there is a lot of cool scenes, like we said, that were kind of either in the trailers or omitted from the trailers, which was, like the part where we literally see a man explode like a hot dog in a microwave. Like, that was a thing that you and me both, like, were like, holy crap, that's pretty graphic and amazing.
Oh, yeah, no, like, there's some scenes that kind of caught me off guard, but at the same time, it was in that special kind of anime way of, wow, this is horrific, but I'm enjoying it.
There was something that you were talking to me about, actually, before we did the episode, about the focus of detail. Like, let's get into that a bit, because we actually had like a whole spiel about that. There was a lot of detail that we thought was originally stock footage. Then, like, when we played it back, it was actually like different frames, different
angles. Yeah, the fact that they were using similar camera angles to give you the same feeling without straight up using the same footage over again, because they actually went and reanimated stuff. And it's like that kind of attention to detail you don't get with modern anime. With modern anime, they're like, oh, Canon's firing this direction, this camera angle. Oh, we just got to change the background to be a different time of day, and we're not going to touch it. But back then, it was like everything was done so, intentionally. And it's something that is part of the art of anime that is missing in modern days. And
yeah, because
so seeing it on display like this is wonderful.
Yeah, because one of the actual focuses we were talking about was the fact that each of the battleship-like cannons on the actual Ra, actually, you would see it move. You would actually see it move like an actual normal battleship. Like, they took a lot of that detail to what a normal, battleship would be, and they actually incorporated it into each of your cannons. Now, I forget how many cannons the Ra had in this incarnation, but each cannon, when you would see the three, they would actually, like, all cycle about like a normal anti-aircraft shell would for a battleship. And it was actually very, very different, which not many animes do. I know that's more focus of detail on other shows like, Captain Harlock and Battleship Yamato, because that's trying to add to that realism of it's a battleship in wartime.
Yeah, I think, like, with a lot of, like, anime that focus on something like a battleship doesn't move a whole lot in terms of, like, actual physical motion. Like, the ship's only going to move a certain amount of distance. So it makes up for it by having a lot of parts that move on top of it and within it. So you're seeing that motion is how you get an exciting battle sequence when you have battleships.
Yeah, and one of the things that I still find funny about this production, too, is, like I said early on, before I got into the overall review or synopsis for our review here, is that this was a huge production through Kawakata, who, are the guys who bought out the rights to Daiei when they went under, the guys who produced the Gamera films, Daimajin, and Toho, and Bandai Visual, and I think one other group. Like, it took 4 of these people to bring this story together and produce it, which is actually a huge feat, seeing that Toho and Daiei can never come to terms of, can we bring Godzilla and Gamera together? Because from what I understand, Daiei wants to do a real Godzilla versus Gamera movie, and Toho is like, no, if we have to do it, they have to be somehow enemies, but not enemies, kind of thing, like, common ally thing. So at the end, they would, like, go into 2 different directions. It's more about, trying to protect their property, and Daiei's like, let's just fight to the death and have them both die, and they're like, no. No. But that's another story. The other thing, though, that you and me were saying was actually an interesting and intriguing fact about this series is that its main music, or its main score, is mostly done by the Poland Warsaw Orchestra, which is actually very rare that they go and outsource a orchestra not in Japan nor mainland Asia.
Yeah, it's kind of like outsourcing of music is very rare. I have seen it done for some Japanese productions, but it did give kind of like, it gave this anime a little bit of a regal feel to it, which I thought was nice because it kind of just added to the general, like, epic scale of this OVA in a way that I think other series don't get that benefit. And especially, again, compared to modern anime, you don't get, like, full orchestras doing music anymore.
And if they are full orchestras, they're, like, by a private, micro enterprise. Like, with Sawano, he has like not a full orchestra, but he has people that can, play orchestral instruments. Like he has like maybe like small groups, or he'll have an actual presentation when he does a live performance for his music, but he never usually has, I think, a full in-house studio, like say the Poland Warsaw Orchestra, or like say in big movie budget, like say Hans Zimmer or John Williams. Like you rarely see that with anime. You rarely see huge array of musical talent in one consortium contributing to a score or an OST. It's like a guy who's able to use a keyboard and play 5 different instruments gives you your entire score.
I think
that's usually how it feels like.
I think one of the more modern examples of outsourcing music was Gundam Thunderbolt, because they were going for the jazz theme with its score and its insert songs. They had to go find professional jazz musicians, and I think they recorded it outside of Japan even, to make sure they got the right sound and the right instruments for the music. And so that kind of, they went for a completely different direction. Whereas with Super Atragon, you're getting more of a epic orchestral classical feel, which can be replicated nowadays with technology. But since it was in that era of, well, we got to go find an orchestra and get that recorded, it does give it that level of quality that makes us feel really special.
Yeah, because here's a good example, too, that it's funny. Back when I was watching a lot of the ADV trailers, normally with the animes, they either had, like, non-copywritten music either put over their trailers, or they would actually take the opening theme song to the production. So, not having seen Atragon until several years later, when I heard that classical music, I was like, oh, this is probably some free reign, non-copywritten music that they just put over it because they didn't have the license to put in the trailers the actual opening theme song or the music used in the production. Because there were a few minor shows that they didn't have the rights to produce it for their trailers, but others did, like Neon Genesis actually having its main theme song, its iconic theme song.
Bubblegum Crisis had its theme song.
Yeah, and that's where I wasn't sure, because some of the other trailers, I think, didn't, or they only would put the montage versions when they were trying to pump out, hey, here's all of the titles under our license that you might be interested in. So, hearing it, it's an impact, it's great. And, now it's time to talk about, what we like to coin here on the show lately, because, it's from a Gundam series we like, Turn A, Sid Mead, and how he prefers to call vehicles the character, like the Gundam. Let's talk about our interpretation of the Gotengo, the Raw. I gotta say, it's really interesting, this take on it, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's like really cool because it kind of takes like the basic design and then pluses it into the anime reality that Super Atragon lives in, because when you have something that's done live action, there's always the constraints of how do we get this thing to look right in a physical space. But with anime, you can do it however you can draw it. So if you think it, you can do it. And that kind of gave it more freedom to get a little bit crazy.
Yeah, like one thing I talked to you about was that it gets like a weird Victorian meets steampunk vibe with like the weird frills on it, It has like these weird, almost, I guess you would say, like old school Asian like pirateering or sailing ships, like how it has like an actual, looks like a gill frilled like tail and elements to its exterior, where like you would think, why does it need sails? It kind of reminds me of like Divatox's Golden Fish sub in some regards, how it has like the weird frilliness, how some of the elements of the exterior, when you see like how I guess you would say how the decks are made, feels very mix of not just what the Gotengo was being a warship, but it has like a lot of these weird old school vessels put into it, even though it's supposed to be a 40s boat that was updated to the 90s. So it has this really weird vibe. It has this really weird essence about it that makes it look cooler, makes it look different, and adds in to, I guess, that anime aesthetic you need to sell the ship. Because the original one just looks like a submarine had sex with a battleship and was given a giant drill. Then the Final Wars version, the Millennium version, looks like something you would see somewhat out of like Aliens, like kind of how the vessels were made in Aliens, mixed with what the Gotengo was. It had like that weird style of cyberpunk, I guess you would say. Or,
yeah.
What do they call it? Space goth?
Well, cyberpunk, I think, is more accurate.
But it had a bit of like a weird goth tone, but because I think of the more or less the the style of the color, you know.
Yeah.
But like this one, it has like a weird, nice brown finish. It has gold. It gives like this very weird, you know, it feels like an actual like anime vessel in some regards. And honestly, I think one thing I would have liked is if they would have gave it like, I think, some of the Toho Absolute Zero cannon, because I don't think they even had like a mazer built into it. Like it was just, we drill, we fire, that's all we do. We just shoot artillery. Like like it's been a couple of days since I seen the you know the final part. And I'm like, how was the finish? Did they have a beam? Did they shoot a beam? Did they convert her beams back to her? I'm like, I'm trying to remember. And I probably should have watched it again, but hey.
I probably should have watched it again too, but here we are.
Exactly. Overall, though, besides the overall, I guess you would say, the presentation of this film or whatnot, would you have wanted to have seen a continuation of them meeting the subterranean people, even though I don't think it even happens fully in the book? But would you wanted to have seen more of this be unfolded, or do you think the weird little cliffhanger of optimism was okay in that regards?
Me, as somebody that likes cliffhangers of optimism, I'm going to say that was probably the best way to go. But they could have done other things. They definitely could have done other things.
Yeah, because like I'm trying to hunt down the actual like PDF translated, I guess, versions of the novel on the internet, but there doesn't seem to be much, and there's not enough clarity to confirm if the, you know, how factual or how accurate the anime adapts it more than, say, the tokusatsu. But from what I know is the tokusatsu was good for its time, the anime was better, but the tokusatsu was more iconic in Japan, just because of it addressing the styles of pride and stuff about, you know, being a Japanese soldier in post-World War II Japan, and so on and so forth. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, that one hits home a lot better in Japan, but I think with Super Atragon, it's gotten a more of a cult classic status, because also anime is, unfortunately, more popular in the Western world or Western hemisphere.
This is true, and that's why we have GameSpot making posts saying that Jenga is a live-action adaptation of the Garo anime.
But GameSpot are also, you know,
a video game website
idiots.
That should stay in their damn lane.
They're fucktwads. That's pretty much it. They're fucktwads. So, alright, other than that, to wrap up the review, I think the anime is your best bet if you want to have a good time. If you're an anime and tokusatsu fan, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. If you're just a new fledgling tokusatsu fan who hasn't watched a lot of kaiju films, like I said, you're probably not going to like either or whatnot. It's one of those weird things about, because of how I know how skewed the current status of the main tokusatsu community that I'm immersed in is very Toei-centric, they, you know, this might not be the perfect jumping point. You might need to watch a lot of Godzillas, up your culture and gentrification on how you like your tokusatsu, and then you'll be able to enjoy it, maybe. Who knows? Maybe you'll be able to enjoy this anime. Maybe if you just pretend it's live action, you'll do a lot better. But
I
overall,
want a live-action adaptation of this anime.
Is it weird that I want, one, a live-action adaptation of the anime, but two, I want a better use of the concept of Manda within the style of this series, which I'm hoping that if the Toho cinematic universe is a real thing that's going to happen after Kong vs. Godzilla in Japan, I'm hoping that we get, you know, like these actual plans of them doing, you know, each kaiju or each mainstream kaiju or each mainstream element is going to maybe have its own, you know, singularity point.
Give
of
it
its
the
own
Marvel
film
treatment.
Here's the thing, we can't really call it the Marvel treatment, even though Toho were we call it the Marvel treatment because it's better known in the modern era, but Toho kind of started that first.
Well, it's
because but Toho did do it first.
The Toho method.
Because the Toho method was, they had Godzilla, they had Rodan, they had Mothra, but they, like, this is the problem that I do understand why the Marvel one is better to be called the Marvel method for even Toho, is because their continuities were not connected in their inaugural films. They were not. They were reestablished and retconned later. So I think with the new Toho cinematic universe, they're going to learn from the American cinema and then realize some of the mistakes they made in the past, where they, you know, set up the films and then just were like, how about we just cross them over? And everyone's like, can we do that? Wouldn't that make it a lot weirder because we destroyed 5 major cities over the course of 4 different films? Fuck it, let's just do it anyways.
That's,
you know,
Japan's
that's
like attitude towards continuity.
It kind of is. Like, it started in the Showa era, and it just recently they started having the mindset of maybe we should have continuity outside of Toei.
Toei doesn't care.
Yeah, no, because if you think about it, in the Heisei era, they couldn't really do spin-offs and, reimaginings of, like, say, singular films like Rodan and Mothra, but they were able to reincorporate them into the franchise. However, this time they realized that fans really do want a true Godzilla lore, where we have a Godzilla film, we have a Rodan film or Radon film, we have Mothra. If they were to do an Atragon solo film, bring in Manda, but try to do a Marvel, like, wishy-washy thing of how they bring in another character from their cinematic universe and just put it in the foreground. So maybe make it that, like, they don't know that, ancient civilization of Mu has Manda, and they finally unleash Manda on the world, and the Atragon is actually losing the battle, even though it was destroying most of their technology, and then out of nowhere, Mothra just swoops in and is like, don't worry, fam, I got this. You work on the technology, I work on the living matter. And then everyone would be like, alright, let's do this thing. Something
and
like that.
Masahiro Inoue to play Manda.
Why would you have Masahiro Inoue play a dragon? What?
Because he hasn't played a dragon yet.
I think you're smoking crack.
Nor has he been Sentai yet. So, you need to get those two things done.
No, you know what Masahiro Inoue should do if they were to reboot, the whole cinematic universe of Godzilla? Make him be like the one commander from Godzilla vs. Biollante, who was replaced by his brother to play the same character in Destroyer with the Super X. Just make Masahiro Inoue the
Super X
overseer of the Super X. The Super X advisor and captain.
No. Just have him play the Super X itself.
I think you're high. You're high, bro.
You sure?
You're high. I'm pretty sure. After I showed you that Gal Gaigar Blu-ray copy that I got.
You might have melted my brain.
Exactly. But no. If they are going with the cinematic universe, bring the Gotengo in. Bring back Manda. I don't know if they could work in a standalone film, but it would be cool if they could try.
It's true. It would be cool.
But overall, Atragon is one of those ones where it's astonishing how it's actually really good. It's one of those ones where, in the Western Hemisphere, it's not that well known. And so it's one of those really niche Toho classics in that regard. It's very niche. And a lot more people should really go out and search it. I think we mentioned during the last week's episode that the actual Atragon Tokyo Shock release is practically out of print. There are some people who still have copies of it who are selling it for like $30 a disc. And then there's the actual Super Atragon, where I don't even know if there's any copies out there. You might be able to find one in a used bargain bin somewhere, like say a Barnes & Noble, because I think they sell used stuff, as well as maybe an FYE.
FYE nowadays, because Barnes & Noble doesn't do used stuff anymore.
Okay, so FYE and maybe Best Buy?
Nope.
I don't know.
Not even Best Buy.
Best Buy got rid of that?
Yep. It's just FYE,
so just FYE.
And they're dying.
Yeah, so then just FYE.
Try a local video store, because I know in my area there's like 2 or 3 shops that just sell like old used DVDs. Heck, even my comic shop recently like got in a collection of somebody's old ADV and Bandai Entertainment DVDs, and I found like some stuff for Bubblegum Crisis that I was missing, and it was like, oh hey, this is handy. So always check around, check your local comic shops, your local pawn shops, secondhand stores, video stores, and then maybe check FYE if you're feeling like it.
And if you can't find a physical release, there's always the option of you have to possibly torrent it, which we always say go with the official source, but if it's so out of print that you cannot find it, you will have to torrent it. If
it's out of print, but you can still find it for $10, then please buy the actual DVD. But if it's like this, where it's like, it's kind of hard to come by, and it's going to cost you a pretty penny, unless you're trying to track down whatever bonuses were on that disc, you might want to just torrent it.
Yeah, and the best place to find Super Atragon right now is where most animes are uploaded to, like Nia and Anidex. You'll probably find Super Atragon there. Regular Atragon will be really hard to find. To find the dub, it's practically hard, but luckily with a guy called Gozard, a lot of people know of him. He gets a lot of region 2 actual English dub and re-releases of like what we got here in North America, or released in like South America. He'll release like the actual dub for a lot of the old Godzilla films, or a lot of the newer dubs that aren't released still yet in North America. He'll put them up on places like archive.org. So you can find them. He actually he posted up late last year the actual alternate ending of Frankenstein Conquers the World, where he dies via the octopus. So that's something you should go check out on archive.org. It's easy to locate. You just put in the search engine, boom, you're good. And that's all I can say. Other than that, though, I don't know what our next episode is, but I think me and Soundout might just be like, well, since Project did call this Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu, or the Ungovernables of Tokusatsu, maybe we're just going to start looking at ADV releases outside of Tokusatsu ones. Maybe we might look at,
Bubblegum
like,
Crisis.
other stuff. Who knows? I do know, though, that I did promise Soundout, though, we will either start doing in segments or chunks or in halves the actual Garo Sealed Flames anime, the first Garo anime, as well as its feature-length film.
Yes.
Anyways, though, we'll see you next time on Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu, where we most likely will be talking about Garo of the Sealed Flames, or I always screw it up. It's too long of a name in English.
Garo Hono no Kokuin, or the official English title, Garo the Animation.
Yeah, I prefer doing the full subtitle because then I get it. Because if I
Carved
don't, then I might get
seal
confused
of
with the other
flames.
ones. Okay, yeah, I just leave out the carved part. But
Also known
nevertheless, though,
as the Spanish Inquisition with a Garo and his shithead father.
dude, his father was great. He's not a shithead. He's just a whore.
He's amazing.
Anyways, I'm Wilter21, and this was Soundout12. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on
And we promise we're
Instagram,
not drug
Facebook, and
addicts.
so on other place. No, he is. He is. But we'll see you all next time with episode 73. Hey, it's Wheelchair21, and thanks again for listening to an all-new episode of Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu. If you want to hear more content or see more content from the Hero Club YouTube channel, we're going to need you to subscribe, like, comment with some feedback, and share this channel with a friend. We also would like you to check out our website, hero-club.com, and follow us on various social media outlets just by looking up Hero Club for Life, as well as the stores you see are where we shop. Anyways, thanks again, and we'll see you all next time.